one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now roll call. I'll get this yet.
Joe Fars. Present. Ernie Prieto. Present. Joe Yag. Present. Carolyn Kramer. Here. Liz Ray.
Here.
Michael Kobus. Here. Steve Ford. Here. James Gardner. Here. Gigi Gleason absent.
Okay, thank you. Approval of the minutes of the August 17th meeting. Has we all had a chance to read them? Are there any changes? May I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second? Thank you. All of in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Communications regarding items not on this agenda?
No off-agenda items tonight.
Thank you. Harper Financial Report Update. We have Jane here tonight. Always good seeing you, ma'am.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. Let me get that going. I'm here tonight. Jill is on vacation, so I'm here to present the first quarter results for the harbor. The balance sheet right now, as you can see, and you all have a copy as well. Overall, your cash position's at $6.9 million. And then your liabilities, which are mostly made up of your long-term and short-term notes payable, are at $1.3 million. And your unrestricted cash, which you will see later, which is a lot of it's being used for the capital projects this year, as you can see, is at $5.4 million for a total net position of 13.6. If you have any questions as we go, just raise your hand, speak up, and I'll be glad to answer. Or I can wait and answer questions afterwards. Harbor overview. This is for the revenue and expenditures, so a snapshot of where you're at right now. You're right, this is the first quarter, so it's 25%. So you're running 26% of budget for revenue, and same with operating expenses, and it looks like we're just getting started on some of the capital projects at 3%. Here's more detail on your harbor revenues. You will see that parking right now is at 43%, but that reflects the first quarter of the year, which includes all the summer activity. And we're thankful that most of the summer activity was a little more normal than we had in the prior months of last fiscal year. Here's the expenditures. You'll see that maintenance, police, administration, lifeguard, a lot of those are at 25%. That's because we book the actual 25% of the actual budget every quarter and true it up at the end of the year based on actual cost for maintenance. So overall, you're at 26%. Here's your capital improvement plan details. These are the projects that were on the books. Just a little bit of harbor tunnel improvements. That looks like it makes up most of whatever was spent so far. JDOC replacement, just a little bit. That's the big project, and Ted probably has more information if you're interested on how the project's progressing. And that is the end of my slideshow. Is there any questions I could answer for anyone on this or any other financial matters?
Any questions? Go ahead, Carolyn.
Your pamphlet says Harbor Financial Update first quarter. Is that ending March?
September 30th. We go by a fiscal year of...
Fiscal year.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's not a calendar year, so it goes
My
July
bad.
1 to June 30th. I know. I should have put that in there. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, then we will go on to item number 7. And are you taking that one, Jane?
No. Who's number 7? Oh, I have that. Never mind. I do have that. I didn't get the agenda. So there was a question on the 2010-11 budget on the $5.2 million transfer. Let me pull this up. And this happened, and I'll go through it. What that means. All right. Okay, so back in, I believe it was the fiscal year 2008-09, there were a lot of changes at the harbor. I could have the year a little bit off, but all the employees, as well, which include maintenance costs, the safety, so police, fire, property management over the leases, that was all brought in. And basically, you think of it as their consultants are paying, like you've hired someone to do the maintenance for the harbor. So the general fund has all the employees and is charging the harbor for those services. So in order to pay for them, the harbor has to transfer. In this particular year, all of them together was $5.2 million towards harbor maintenance, police, and lifeguard services, which were absorbed by the general fund. So that's the way it's been going forward. So when I said they're all at 25%, the maintenance, police, at year end, there may be cases where they spent under in maintenance or they spent over in maintenance. We true them up, even though the budgets for this fiscal year is 3.3 million. It may end up in June 30th of next year at 3.1. And so we'll do the actual. In the meantime, we just do 20. We do it based on the 12 each month, how much, so 25% at the end of the first quarter. Does that make sense, or you still have questions?
My question wasn't on this, as I went through this whole 2010, 2011 budget thing, I was under the impression that not only was the 5.2 million, but there was also direction set forth by the mayor at that time to find to find help for the city because they were going broke. And in here, I'm confused because it looks like we paid that year alone $10 million.
I'd have to pull that actual amount, but you wouldn't pay 10 million. I think that's just a duplicative, wherever that number came from. But it's ranged from 5.26 to over 6 million a year.
I understand paying the expenses for the police and whatever else we have to do because now they are, quote, city employees.
Right.
I understand that. But there was also in here, in this one here that's buried in the archives of the city, there was another $5 million that was taken from the enterprise fund from the harbor to help the city out.
That is not a true statement as far as what I'm aware of. I'd have to verify. You'd have to give me the information you have. You cannot, by law, borrow money from your enterprise funds. So water utilities, we can't borrow it for the general fund. We can't borrow money from the harbor. So I'm not sure where that information came from, but that's not something we could do.
Yeah, that's why I had brought up the question,
Yeah.
because when you read this, it's going that 10.3 million from the prior year, and I'm going, wait a minute. This is kind of scary to me, because it's,
Well,
and then 2 years after that, we got socked in the pocketbook for $3.10 a foot raise on our slip rent, because we had no money to do the capital improvements we had to do.
well, the 10.3 that you're referring has nothing to do, it's cumulative of all our general fund, not just the harbor. This statement says fiscal year 2010-11 general fund expenditures are budgeted to be $113,274,857, which represents an 8.3% reduction, or 10.3 million from the prior year. So all it's saying is that we've reduced the entire general fund by 10.3 million. It has nothing to do, it doesn't state in here that it has anything to do with the harbor fund, or that any money's been borrowed from the harbor. It says, then it goes on to say, the reduction to the general fund budget impacted all departments, which is true. Just kind of like what COVID did when we had to adjust the general fund budget in April, and then we actually changed the budget for general fund for this fiscal year based on where we saw potential changes. It goes on to say it'll impact all departments. The harbor and beaches functions have been consolidated into the general fund in the fire, police, and public works departments. So all it's stating is what we talked about earlier, that it used to be have their own employees and all that. All the employees now are consolidated to the general fund, and then they provide the services to the harbor, and the harbor in turn pays for those.
So okay, so in other words, if the police is supposedly budgeted for 2.37 million, which it shows right here in front of us here, and we pay perhaps 2 million for their services, what happens to the rest of the money?
That's a budget, so all you're worried about is the actual. A budget is a spending plan. It has nothing to do with what your actual results are. It's not real money.
I understand
per se.
that, yeah.
So let's say if this was the end of the year today, all that you need to worry about is that you spent $594,502, and you were under budget, which is great because you were spending so much on your capital projects, but that has no impact on the year-end results. It's only
Okay.
a management tool. So you don't have to worry about that. It doesn't like leave money on the table, or you don't lose it or anything like that.
But at the end of the year, if we don't have to pay the total amount of what the city employees are needed for their payroll, what happens to the leftover money? I mean, I know that it's budgeted for
All
that.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is, okay, if at the end of the year we only spend $2,100,000,
Right.
that's all you would pay.
Do we get to keep the rest?
Well, the budget's not real money.
I understand.
So you wouldn't get a $200,000 bonus. You just would spend less than you planned to spend.
Okay,
So at the end of the year, we wouldn't transfer 2.378 million for police. We'd only base it on actual, so 2.1.
okay.
But
So then okay, in my terminology, the leftover that we had budgeted for fire, police, whatever, does not go to the city.
nothing goes to the city. The only that goes for city is one-for-one reimbursement for actual costs. So the budget, again, is not money. So at the end of the year, right now, if we close the year at the bottom line, you have 8.5 budget and 2.2, that 8.5 doesn't mean anything anymore, because really all you spent was 2.2. So you did a really good job. You hardly spent anything. You spent 6.5 less. And if you met your revenue, so you're going to have a lot of money going to your fund balance.
Okay,
So I know if you're not an accountant, I do this all the time, so it's really easy for me, and so I understand it's very normal to be confused by this.
no, I'm not confused by it.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, you only pay for what actually.
I understand that.
And the city doesn't get a dime less or more than what is owed. So we look at all the staffing and everything that's charged to all the 6,000, all the accounts that start over there for maintenance, admin, police, lifeguard, and property management. 5 of them.
Right.
And at year end, we say, okay, what's that actual column? Okay, that's your ending. If we over transferred in earlier quarters, send it back, money, the actual money, and it would end up at, what was that?
Okay. I don't have at hand right now the 2008, 2009 budget in my spot right here. What I will do is, when I get that available, I would like to email that to you,
That's fine.
and then we can go over that, because it shows that, the city was in trouble, like all the cities were during that time. And we have, we lost a lot of money, I don't want to say lost. There was a big change in our budget, in our fund and everything. And it just, to me, seemed that we had a lot more money at that time, and then it's generated down to nothing. And then now we are rebuilding it up, and again, I'm going to harp on this again, we got the $3.10 raise because we didn't have money in our enterprise fund to do the capital improvements that we wanted. So there was a chunk of money that I'm sorry I'm not more better prepared for this.
That's okay. You can
But-
send it over to me. I'll be
yeah.
glad to look at it.
It just shows that we are that there's a chunk of money that was here, and then the city needed money, and it was borrowed, levied, whatever you want to call it. And I was wondering if we were ever going to get that back. And I will bring that up to you.
Yeah, and I would like, because that's a pretty big statement to make as far
Okay.
as, I'm not aware of anything, but if you could bring me the information
I will.
to back up the assertion that you're making, then I'll be glad to look at it. I wasn't here then, but keep in mind, our books are audited every single year. So if we had done something like this, more than likely, although audits aren't designed to catch fraud or anything like that.
I'm
but
not
if-
saying it was fraud.
Well, then if we did something improper, most cases it would be found. So I just need to know what you're making.
Okay.
What your basis is for such statements, and I'll be glad to address it.
Okay, and then perhaps at the next meeting or the next year, we could go over that.
Yeah, Jill will be here, but I'll be glad to prepare her for that discussion.
Okay,
And if necessary, if it comes to it, I'll be glad to be here as well.
thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, and like I say, this is a question that I've been trying to get, I should have come to you, but I've gone to other people, other harbor managers, and they just kind of say, well, don't worry about it. And, this is something that's been in my craw for a
Well, it's
while.
concerning you, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
I'll be glad to look at it with you so I can see
Okay.
it through your eyes, because without having the papers, it's hard for me to see it through your eyes. Then
Right.
I can maybe
And I
build a
thought I had
story
it.
around it with what really happened, because you don't look at this day in, day out like I do. So, you're not expected to know what everything means. So hopefully I can help you get some clarity.
Yeah, I've done budgets for quite, not for a city, but I've done budgets for large companies and other entities. So I
You're
am.
familiar with them.
Yes,
That's
I'm
great.
familiar with it. And then when I saw that, I'm going, and then when you don't get anybody to really respond to it, I should have perhaps just gone
contact
to you.
me.
All right,
I do respond to emails. I'll even talk to you on the phone.
okay, thank you.
Whatever works for you.
Okay.
Just so that you can get comfortable with it.
It's not only comfortable, it's just to finally put to rest a question that has been floating around the harbor since 2008, 2009. and it's something that we should be able to address.
Yeah,
And
I'm
again,
going to look at it tomorrow morning when I get in.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked at 2008, and I'm probably,
it's in the
my
archives.
first year here, I have all those,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, it'd be in the archives. But I will look at it and be prepared for your question.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Anything else? Yes.
Listen, I know you've got a lot of money going a lot of different directions, but I couldn't help but notice that the miscellaneous is the only one that's over budget. So what happened to Mr. Miscellaneous?
I don't have the detail in front of me. I'd have to get an answer for you on what's miscellaneous.
I'm sure there's a good explanation, but it seems
Usually-
odd that everything is under except for
Yeah, I'll have to see
miscellaneous.
what
That's my only
expenses-
question. I understand.
Yeah, Jennifer, do you know anything about those?
Sure.
You don't, okay. I can look into it. I don't know. I'll send it to Ted and Jennifer, and they can send it out to you. I didn't do this work, so I didn't have, I know, can you believe that? I actually had staff do it. So Jill did it before she left on vacation. So unfortunately, I don't have the fine details for you, but I will get them tomorrow morning.
And clarification on debt services, what is that?
So that's for all your note payables?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
They call it debt service, so they're servicing debt. Woo.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And that one, in August, or every year, generally it's August for most of our debt, you pay the principal amount and 6 months of interest.
Okay.
And then in March, usually you just have 6 months of interest.
Months of
So
interest.
This is the biggie, so the remaining will be the next payment that we'll make in the next quarter.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is special events, Mr. Patrick Young.
Here you go.
Thanks.
You have-
No, I go old school.
Wow, I like
So, thank you, Commissioner and Commission members, for allowing me to speak about an update on special event. Is this better? Can you hear better now? I just want to thank the chairman and committee members for allowing me to give you a quick update on special events and how it impacts the harbor. And if you have any questions, it's best to get a good dialogue and go forward prior to anything happening. I just want to give you a brief overview of what's been happening with myself and the city as far as it goes with COVID-19 and how our events are being handled or not events being handled. Primarily, I've got a really good communication with the Chief Resilient Officer, Gary Johnston, of the county, as well as some other state officials on what is acceptable and what is not. And one of the things that they do is they give criteria what they would approve if they were on site and how they would approve it. And the first thing that they have to do is have what's called a safe reopening plan that's approved by the county. And then what else happens too is if there's any type of event, right now, the only current types of events that are being approved are single type events like professional golf. Or just golf at a youth level because it's a single person, or tennis. Right now, we're trying to get surfing under that state approval, and I believe it's going to happen within the next week or two. They're going to come out and say that surfing is a real entity and youth surf contests will be allowed to be implemented. Going into that, I just want to give you a brief history. We did have Supergirl, but at a very, very toned-down version, and it was approved by the state and county and the WSO, which is the World Surfing League, which is the governing body of all professional surfing sports. So what wound up happening is through a couple different conversations at the state and county level, we petitioned to get Supergirl to go forward in Oceanside. We had that at the pier on October 10th, or not 10th, but the 3rd and 4th. And we submitted a safe reopening plan. They reviewed it 3 or 4 times, and it got approved through professional sports. And from that criteria is how it's going to come down to hopefully allowing youth and other type of surfing events to happen. So Oceanside was the leader state leader, an actual world leader. That's the first sanctioned World Surf League event that happened since COVID-19. It was done safely and had a reduced field of participants. Instead of 120, we had 16, and they were kept in bubbles. And how it got approved is that it was a professional sports, just like baseball, football. You could have no crowds or limited crowds as long as you could prove you were not going to have spectators interacting or having crowd gatherings at all. Well, one of the key things is that all the contestants were kept in a bubble, and their handlers and coaches were all kept with them. We didn't have any interaction with staff or anything else. Specific protocol for temperatures for every athlete was taken, additional waivers, and how we kept the crowds out is we had a very, very reduced footprint. And what I mean by that, normally we have 20,000 at this event. We had maybe 800. So it went from, it was a fraction of the size, and the time of the event too was considered in the off season, which is in October. It was a very big thing for Oceanside, and how it's going to help the harbor is this entire event's going to be broadcasted through Fox Sports networks beginning in November all the way through the second week of January at all their different sport channels for filler time and everything else. So what's going to happen is Oceanside, it couldn't have been a better weekend to have it. Perfect waves, the weather cooperated. It was just a postcard at every angle you could do. And the event went better than expected. The state officials were really proud of how Oceanside prepared and how we executed this. And now it leads into how it's going to help the harbor. Hopefully from this, we're going to start filling hotels in the harbor, based on what they're looking at. Oceanside's the only venue that was safe and approved by the state, county, and the World Surf League. It must be safe, so people are going to start to come to travel. Once that happens, it's really going to help the harbor out with TOT and other avenues. Leading into youth, we're trying to get youth sports and youth surfing approved, so we may be starting to get small with a safe reopening plan to start being able to do youth surf, and that's the only thing that we're looking at right now, not team sports at all, just youth surfing. And our Olympic team, I don't know if you guys know, but Team USA, their home surfing training area is Oceanside. They want to do their trials here too. They're trying to submit a safe reopening plan to allow Team USA to do their trials for the Olympics, and they want to do it in the harbor. We haven't gotten an approval from the state yet on that, but they want to do it within the next month or so. If they do get approved, they want to go forward as quickly as possible so that they can solidify their team to represent the U.S. And it really is a big deal having Team U.S. Originate from Oceanside. That, again, helps the harbor with tourism and other things, too. You can brand your stuff with being an Olympic affiliation. It helps you overall. So now what we're getting into now is Hollywood. Hollywood just completed their safe and reopening practices with the state. So now they're allowing film production to happen. I'm in negotiations right now to finish up season 5 from Animal Kingdom. And they'd indicated they wanted to do 2 or 3 scenes at the harbor. I don't have anything in writing from them yet. They want to come in within the next 3 weeks to a month. That's how Hollywood always does. They have all these different ideas. Until it gets whittled down to the bare minimum, that's when I start to present the ideas. They change so many times between now and they actually shoot. But Warner Brothers is looking at renting out Lot 12 for 2 to 3 days. And when they do rent out Lot 12, the harbor does get that revenue. It doesn't get split with anyone else. You get your normal parking revenue. And when I do rent it out to them, I rent it out for 2 to 3 times what the entire lot, because you do turn it over, but the entire lot would do for that day. And then after that, I do want to let you know we are on schedule, but if I was a betting man in Las Vegas, which I don't bet, I always lose, so. Ironman is scheduled for the 27th of March this year. That's going to be the first major event. If COVID goes through or not, it's still a big question mark. I don't think it's going to happen, but I didn't think Supergirl was going to get approved, but it did. which I'm very pleased with. But Ironman is the first major event, and it's scheduled for the 27th of March, 2021. And there are some major hurdles on that. They plan on moving the majority of the site to the harbor, but they're cutting the attendance in half. And I don't know if some of you were around back in 2008, 2009, I think was the last time they held it at the harbor. They only had 1,500, or I think they had 2,200, and they felt they outgrew the facility to hold the 3 different disciplines starting and finishing in one location. But since COVID, they're reducing everything, and we have construction. They're trying to reduce it to a number that would work and that would get approved with the health officials too. I mean, I really think there's a 70% chance that's not going to happen. It's maybe 75% chance it's not going to happen, but we still have it on the books, and we're still going forward as if it would. And what I do want to do is open it up for questions about events. Or one thing I did forget is, being in contact with the county and state officials. They strongly discourage any type of holiday gatherings. They think we're going to have a mutation of the COVID-19, and they're unsure of many different strains that it might mutate, and having outdoor events or any type of major events during the holidays. They're discouraging that. We're not going to have the tree lighting event. They don't want to have the holiday parade event whatsoever. That's the things that's coming from the state and county. They're recommending not having any type of holiday events. You can still have a tree out and decorate and not kill that and not be a Grinch all the way through. But they don't want to have anything that's going to cause crowds or anything that's going to draw a crowd for people to assemble. That's the reason being. They get close together, sneezing, the new flu season's happening. They're really afraid of what's gonna come this next flu season, so they're discouraging all type of holiday gatherings. So that's where we're at now. Any questions?
Joe?
Joe?
Yeah, we put in the yacht club and I put in a permit application for the annual swap meet of marine gear, and it was refused, and I understand why. But it's similar to the farmer's market, except that it's not food. Is that how the farmer's market's allowed to operate?
The state,
Because it's essential?
no, well, the state has guidelines, and we follow what the state says. It's kind of like, I hate to use the terminology, but it's just like the mom and pop shops. Even though they sell commerce, so does Walmart. Makes no difference. Even one's much larger than the other. How a farmer's market got determined to be essential is that that's essential food, and that's the market where people go to shop. That's the only reason why farmers markets are allowed to be open. There is no other reason but that.
Okay.
So you don't see street fairs or anything else, you just see a farmer's market.
Okay.
So that's the best answer I could give you.
Okay, thank you.
Carolyn?
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you. I'm sure this committee appreciates you coming and updating us since the impacts are on our beaches and our harbors. So, and I also want to thank you for all the work you're doing to make our Scholastic Surf Series and our leagues for our kids to get back up and running. So I know you're working really hard on that, and I want to thank you for that, because
You're
we're
welcome.
ready
It's
to
my
go.
pleasure. And I have the feeling that the more activity we have that's controlled and wholesome, people just spend more money in the harbor, and it helps the merchants, it helps everybody.
Well, that's what our kids do. So, I mean, and our families do. So they support the merchants in the harbor because they're always looking for food. So
Right.
whether it's a breakfast or it's lunch, yeah, kids get hungry. They surf and they're hungry. So
And I'm on the same wavelength as you. I want to see it happen. I really do. And I'm going to be pressing for it and getting, I mean, there's still the state officials, they were at Supergirl and they were amazed at how well run it was. And I didn't really go into detail on how we didn't have any fans that showed up, but basically we had a green screen from the bait shack of the pier all the way down to pier view. So it prevented people from gathering on the pier and watching. And then we had a large section of the beach area, it still was open to the public just outside of the footprint. But the event organizer and went on TV 3 or 4 times on their website, please do not come. We're going to simulcast it. We can't have this event with fans. And to my amazement, the fans cooperated. I really expected it to be a lot different, and we planned for the worst and got the best, and it couldn't have gone better. And the fans really did respect it, and we didn't have a whole big, viewing, and most people didn't even know what happened because they weren't promoting it like they normally do. So we all worked together to get that, and now that we got that first hurdle, I think it's going to be a lot easier to get youth and some of the other surf activities back on track.
I've been at all the Supergirl events, and this is the first one I did not attend. I watched it online, and I was amazed at how well the event promoter handled the situation, how they worked with the city. So it was a shot in the arm for surfing for Oceanside anyway. So thank you.
You're welcome. And one other thing too is they did film that in high def. So I don't know, that's the first time they had a women's professional surf event filmed in high def. So I'm like, yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm on the mic. And we had one of our own local girls, Katie Simmers, was in the winner's circle. It was
Wow.
a team format, and born, raised, local girl, surfs Pier Harbor all the time. She's a perfect candidate for the next Olympic team. And she was on, it was a team format, and she was on the team with Lakey Peterson, who's a WSL surfer. And Katie just showed him what Oceanside was all about. So she ended up on the winning podium with Lakey Peterson. So that was awesome for Oceanside. Yeah.
No, we're all very proud of how Oceanside looked and prepared, and the whole city has been supported this event, which they supported by not showing up, which was great. And we're going to get a lot of good press out of this, and I think that what it'll translate is additional dollars into the harbor businesses and additional TOT that most likely is going to be a big result from this contest.
Any other questions? Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Next, we have Harbor Police. Lieutenant Sullivan, please.
Good evening, Chairman Ray and the rest of the committee. I hope you are having a good evening. My report for this evening, in the last quarter, we have had a pretty much flat line in policing activity along the beach and especially in the harbor. One of our key issues has been vehicle burglaries, in the East Harbor lot and also along Pacific Street. We arrested a couple of gentlemen that reside down in the riverbed, or down in the river in the St. Louis Ray, that we feel are predominantly responsible for those thefts. And since their arrest, our reported crime has almost dropped to 0. So that has been quite beneficial for us. As far as maritime activity, our unit has been involved in a couple of different operations with our federal law enforcement partners in regards to dope smuggling or narcotic smuggling coming into our harbor. We'd intercepted a couple of boats offshore that were part of this program that they'd followed up from San Diego. And very few maritime rescues, a few tows and things of that nature, but nothing significant. Our largest and most tragic event that we have dealt with in the last quarter was the industrial accident upon our beach. I can't go into a lot of details about that accident in particular because I am certain that this case will be litigated. But it was not it was a contractor for the Army Corps of Engineers, and most of the arrangements and liability, in my opinion, will fall on them, but it did happen on our beach. And unfortunately, a woman lost her life as a result of this accident. Are there any questions?
Steve?
Well, quite a few of us are concerned about the homeless in Oceanside. I'm sure you're aware that I think it has increased over the years. I've been in North County for 30, lived in Oceanside for 8, and I see a predominantly increase in the homeless. Now it's creeping into the Oceanside harbor. I visit the harbor daily, and I've noticed that 2, sometimes 3 cars spend the night with the T-shirts and the blankets hanging over the windows and the windshield to shield the occupants from the rising sun. I think along with that comes crime, unfortunately. And that's true throughout California, but you know, we're concerned about it. I'm sure you are too. Have you got any plans to nip that in the bud?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, in the wisdom of the state of California, they've actually taken away the laws that would allow us to do direct enforcement. There was a case that we've actually discussed here. It was a Boise case that went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, in which they said law enforcement will not proactively engage in the enforcement, especially city code and any state codes, in direct relation to those without me. That accident a few years ago that happened on the beach, I'll use this as an example. It would have been illegal for someone to sleep or camp on the beach. People can sleep on the beach. Sunbathers do it all the time. But camping on the beach, where they would bring out a tent and set up camp there, has been and will continue to be prohibited in our city. But sleeping in vehicles, there are very few laws in which we can enforce that would make a difference. And that started about a year ago. And on top of that, there was a couple of propositions that were voted on by the good citizens of the state of California that released people from jail, nonviolent criminal offenders. That doesn't mean they don't have violence in their past. It means that their last charge, their last arrest, was nonviolent, predominantly drug-related or theft-related. And they exited those people out of our judicial system or out of our custody areas. And they are now walking around amongst them. And it has taken away many tools that we would have normally used to control that very thing that you're talking about. But on the flip side, we have the city of Oceanside, and specifically the police department, our homeless outreach team. It's a two-pronged approach to our homelessness issues in our city. One is our homeless outreach team. Its sole purpose is to connect services, housing services, just basic service as far as needs. Clothing, not so much food, but clothing, identification, social security type services, in an effort to give these people the first step as far as their foundation. Those that don't comply, those that live in the riverbed or live elsewhere, outside of the norm, I'll say. We also, and I supervise both these teams, by the way, is a crime suppression team that deals specifically with that homeless issue in our downtown area and our beach area and things of that nature. Like I said, the one team is there to support and to connect the services. The other team that I have is there to do enforcement on the limited scope of things that they can still do. And they do that extremely proactive. So, and our regular officers that are either the harbor officers or the regular patrol officers, or my officers that are assigned to the beach south of the pier or south of the harbor, all the way to the city limits. Homelessness and our transient population take up 90% of their day, because that is what they focus on. That is a complaint that we hear multiple times a day, and I agree. I wish there was more that we could do. I encourage you to vote to change the law. I would greatly appreciate it.
Any other questions?
You know the young woman that lost her life on the beach with the tractor accident?
Yes, sir.
She became a regular in the marina, and she appeared to be homeless, very haggard appearance, sunburned, sleepy, laying on the benches. And your officers, were they prevented to talking to her and getting her in a placement? Because a local slip renter like myself during pandemic and other things that go on nowadays, I would classify her as unapproachable for me. But the officers, were they aware of her presence? Because she'd been here about 3 weeks.
They, not only were they aware of their presence she's been in our city about 18 months. She is significantly older than a young lady. She's an adult.
Okay.
And she had many contacts with law enforcement, specifically our HOT team, as well as our crime suppression team, as well as numerous other contacts with other law enforcement officers in the city.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Carolyn?
Lieutenant, you said there was car burglaries, especially concentrated in one lot. Would that be Lot 1 or?
Yes, ma'am. Lot 1 and also the East Harbor lot is in that area. In my opinion, and based on the facts of the evidence and some statements that were made, those lots, because they have such close accessibility to the riverbed area, and the bike path that goes through there is in an expressway for those that live down in the riverbed, and easy access and literally right on the borders of what they consider home.
So would that have been the lot directly across from North Coast Village? Those two lots affected? Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I can get my microphone on. Sorry, Lieutenant, thank you. I just wanted to kind of make a comment, bring something to your attention of an incident that I was actually involved in as a reporting mariner. And I wanted to make sure that you were aware that in this last quarter that there was a vessel up on the rocks that I found and located 6:30 on a Saturday morning. I made 3 attempts on Channel 16 to contact the Oceanside Harbor Police with no response. I am fortunate enough to have OPD dispatch in my cell phone, which I contacted them, and they came out. And as a prudent mariner, I made sure there were no humans on board and no one was in danger, and I continued on with my work. I was working that morning. I feel like the protocols of the maritime reporting maybe need to be addressed. It's early in the morning, it's late at night. That's when disasters happen a lot of times. You can't expect them to only happen during normal business hours. And I did mention this to Ted in passing already before. I just want to make sure that you are aware, because I know that you supervise a lot of these teams that are there. I was found out later that this was a drug vessel that was washed up on the beach, or person, something like that. But it's disheartening to call out on 16 for the Oceanside Harbor Police and not have a response.
I wholeheartedly agree
As a
that
mariner.
shouldn't happen.
So I just wanted to bring that to your attention to make sure you were aware that that morning I reported that vessel. I made sure there were no persons no lives in danger. There was no one on board. We came right up to it, saw no one in there, and I went on with my day. But I called on the cell phone because I couldn't get through on the VHF.
Okay.
Response.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? On our training, are we fully trained with all of our staff for the
Yes, ma'am.
harbor?
Yes, ma'am. Over the course of, since about January 21, we've had 2 retirements and then another officer that was above the age of 50 and has been an employee or vested employee here and moved on to another agency. We needed to replace those officers, and we have 3 new officers in the harbor that are fully trained, up to speed, and very capable. The last one, young lady, her name is Officer Kidd. She just received her certification and was set free to work independently about 3 weeks ago. So she is very excited, and we are still planning on having a meet and greet.
Okay.
I'm also trying to schedule some joint training with our fire department in the harbor, and I'm thinking maybe it'd be a good opportunity for all parties involved to be in that meet and greet. So
Now, when the boats go out, normally there are 2 officers on the boat. I've seen up to 3 to 4 officers on the boat. Is there any reason for that?
We are training, like I said, I have 2 teams. I have also a beach team that are beach officers that we use as seconds on the boats. They aren't going to be piloting the boats, especially during an emergency situation, but we need deckhands. And so we try, especially this time of year, we have a little more freedom because the beach isn't as busy. We'll get them out on the boats for exposure, for just routine repetition of fundamental skills is what our goal is.
Is there any set schedule or any set regulation or something that you have for your officers to go out and patrol the harbor? I mean, unfortunately, at times I'm there on the weekends quite often and during the week, and I'm kind of looking around and I don't see you guys out there on the water itself.
I hate to set you will spend 4 hours of your day on the boat type rules, because some of my officers will spend 12 hours on that boat. Some don't enjoy spending that much time on the vessel in a single occurrence. We have to balance our land side and our maritime enforcement and patrols. And you are now the second person that has told me about not seeing boats on the water a lot. And I talked to my sergeants about it actually after our last meeting as a result of our conversation, sir. I know that I'm paying a lot in fuel bills, so I know the boats are going out, but they are, and these are not, this isn't the black and white boat, those are the red boats that are used specifically for that. They are going out and doing routine patrols, but we can increase them if that's what you'd like.
Okay, because it would be nice, you know, to have more visual out there, especially when we had, well, the crowds are now gone, but when we had all of the stand-up paddle boards and all those out there, even though the rental company did have a boat going up and down,
Yes.
you can't miss the big red boats.
No, you cannot. If I can interject one thing, there was another incident in the harbor that I'm hesitant to talk about, but it just happened the other day. There was a family that was vacationing in the harbor that were in the hotel. And a big family, 5 children, 3 or 2 were special needs kids.
Okay,
A 5-year-old actually escaped the room, and it was on the water side and was down on the rocks. And actually, this young man decided that it was a good day for a swim and took off out into the basin. Swimming unsupervised, mom and dad had no idea that the child was gone. Brothers and sisters, I'm sure, were busy doing something else, and they weren't watching little brother. And by the grace of God, and I do mean that with that much respect and fervor, he saved that child's life. There was a paddleboarder that was actually paddling by and hoisted that child up and then notified us, brought him over to it. But I would say the time of gone to the time of recovery, probably less than 3 minutes. And that would have been another tragic accident in our harbor had it not been for one of those paddleboards. They're not all bad, I
oh,
promise.
no, they're not all bad. No, not all bad. One other question, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Long time, a couple months ago, well, a few months back, we were asking about logbooks for the different boats that we have, the 1, 2, 3, and I call it the drug boat, the black and white one. Do we have those?
I do. I have maintenance records and expenditures from our service provider.
Okay.
And I do have those books, but the black and white boat, that is not any way paid for or related to the harbor, so you won't get that.
Okay, that's through a grant.
That is federally funded and for the sole purpose of narcotic immigration or narcotic.
So hence the drug and running boat is a good name for it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's why it's black and white and not red.
And as far as boat number 2, that poor thing is kind of sitting there.
It is. I think the most prudent course for that vessel, I've been an advocate for selling that thing. The cost of repairs make it put it into a different stratosphere as far as affordability. It has long since expired its service life. It had a service estimate of about 30 years. It was commissioned and put into service in 1984. And it's been used as a police rescue vessel since that date. It's been repowered 7 different times, and it needs repowered now. It's a twin engine, and to the tune of those engines, about $50,000. It's also equipped with a fire pump. That fire pump engine needs to be replaced, as well as the fire apparatus needs to be updated. And that is about $25,000 or $30,000. I can buy, and we have priced, and I actually had funding to purchase a different platform. We have backup systems to the fire apparatus on the boats. And I see no need to have a third vessel that does the same thing. When we need a smaller, more maneuverable, in my opinion, a single screw gas-powered vessel with an outboard that it costs about $5,000 to $7,000 to repower, that would be specific to the harbor. It would make the ease of going in between the lanes and all the docks so much easier, and I think would increase our response time. Unfortunately, that funding also disappeared, and in light of a potential transition in service providers to the harbor, all plans have been put on hold.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening.
You too. Next up, Ted, Harbor Report.
Good evening, Committee Chair Ray, Vice Chair Kobus, committee members, Ted Chaffone, Harbor Division Manager. I have several presentations for you tonight. The first one being our regular update. I'd like to go through this with you. First, we have the slip wait list. I know that's something everybody's been interested in. I'm not going to spend any time on it. You can certainly look at that. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer that. Harbor dredge, as everyone knows, the harbor dredge is complete. It was successful from the standpoint of cleaning out the harbor inlet. The contract called for 180,000 cubic yards. That was the requirement that Manson needed to make, and they actually dredged 221,500 cubic yards, so significantly more than was expected. The harbor inlet was dredged to a -25 and is in good shape at this point. Manson Construction still has one contract period left, and they will be back in the spring. At this point, we anticipate Manson Construction arriving at the harbor in early April. So that is the current plan. We'll let you know as that progresses. Capital improvements, just to give you, again, a heads up where we are heading, the J-dock replacement. Permit is still pending on that project. I anticipate hearing from the Coastal Commission early November with the final permit. That still will determine whether or not this project will take place this winter. So we will wait to see where that ends up. And if we can be assured that the project can start and be completed before Memorial Day weekend, then we will proceed. If Bellingham cannot commit to that based on the timing of these permits, it's very possible this would be delayed until after Labor Day. We are not going to have construction during the summer. Lot number 1, Tunnel 80A, is complete. And those are just some of the final numbers that came in for that project. Here's where we are currently with maintenance. These are major maintenance items that we are working on. SB9 is the restroom facility by Elgrin's area, by the rod and reel shop. that is currently under remodel. We are, in my opinion, at least on schedule, if not ahead of schedule. So we're looking forward to completing that in the next few weeks. SB7 is the restroom by ZDOC. We anticipate starting that just after the New Year's and completing that again well before Memorial Day. The playground has been under construction. Our staff has done quite a bit of repair and replacement to the playground. They just finished all of the painting. We are waiting on one approval for funding to replace the soft ground underneath the playground, and we anticipate that happening in November. And opening that up, we certainly have a lot of parents and children that are eager to get onto that playground. Just to show you, that's SB9. That's the current restroom that's currently being remodeled. SB7, which will start in January, and then the playground, as you all have seen, is currently marked off right now. Everyone, I think, has been aware, at least from our committee here, that we are working towards a program to identify all of the kayaks and dinghies and everything else that is tied up throughout the harbor for many years, if not decades. A lot of those areas are being used to tie up. We don't know who the vessels belong to. We need to know and understand who they belong to for many reasons. And so we're working towards that. We have a committee, call it the Dinghy Committee, of a few harbor individuals, as well as a couple from your committee right here, as well as harbor staff. We've met multiple times. We've discussed items via email, and we will have more information at the next meeting, hopefully nailing down how this is all going to work. At this point, and you'll see I have a presentation, a couple of presentations from now, where one of our very astute committee members, in fact, our chair, recognized that some of the language in our current ordinance was incorrect. And if we didn't take care of that, we were not going to be allowed to have dinghies on floats, which we have throughout the entire harbor, and we want to allow that option. So we have to take that to the council very soon. Boat Rentals of America, as you know, they have been here, I think it was the last meeting, and you were able to ask them a number of questions, and we've all been frustrated with the amount of activity in the harbor and some of the safety issues that you've seen as well as that I've seen. They have been very responsive. They know that there are still issues pending, and they have made these decisions on this slide here and have already implemented most of them. Number one, no alcohol no longer is being allowed on the vessels. The pedal boats that they had added to their fleet, the larger ones, have been, well, they're still there, but they're no longer being rented. They're installing signage on all of their boats and their docks. They do plan to have a safety video produced, something that each one of their renters would need to watch prior to a rental. And they have created a word-for-word instruction that their employees are now required to read to every renter. Because one of the issues that we identified, and through the help, again, of our slip renters who are very good at investigating themselves, recognized that even their staff wasn't saying the same thing to every renter. So they were missing items. And they have put a vessel on the boat, certainly on busy weekends, and they've committed to do that on busy weekends, holidays, and any day when there's too much activity. So I'm hopeful that this is going to prove to be something that's going to work for all of us. Yes, Vice Chair Kobus.
I want to add to that, that they also are monitoring Channel 12 for all the boaters out there to know if they see anything, vessels in the middle of the fairway or what have you. They have someone they can call on their handheld radio.
And they also have a phone number that you can call if you don't have a radio.
Correct. I will briefly just discuss this. It is one of my presentations a little bit from now where I'll go into greater detail, but the consulting services that we have been going through an RFQ and an RFP process We're almost all the way there, and I do want to present to you our recommendation in a little bit. And that's as far as my updates go. If you have any questions regarding that, I'd be glad to answer that. Otherwise, I'll move on to my next presentation.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Steve?
Well, quite a few of your improvements have not gone unnoticed. I've received some positive results. I want to point out that we're very excited about you upgrading the dinghy racks and then adding additional in-the-water storage for the dinghies, other vehicles. In addition to that, the new stop sign at the triangle at the north entrance has really been helpful negotiating, coming in and out of there, because, you know, there was a real potential for accidents, especially for tourists. I understand there's plans for a new restaurant going to the Jolly Roger. That's great news. Can you share something with us on that?
Committee Member Ford, thank you. The Jolly Roger is the brand that is currently operating the restaurant. The actual leaseholder is another company, and that leaseholder is going to replace another restaurateur to operate. What they're doing right now is working towards permitting, which I believe has been expedited through the city so that they can have some outdoor seating. That's part of the issue, as you have seen with many of the restaurants. They were unable to operate because they had no place for people to eat. So they're working on that, and as soon as that gets established, we're hoping that they'll be able to have a restaurateur in there. They have no intention of leaving that location at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, I've not seen any progress on the tunnel, but I've noticed today you added the ADA. Is this going to be accessible for the handicapped? What's the end goal for that tunnel?
So the tunnel is complete. The only improvements that were made to it were all ADA improvements. So some of the slope, some of the issues regarding the grade, the crossing, the electronic pedestrian signs that they have, those are all complete. So that tunnel is complete. It's not being expanded. The tunnel is a Sandag responsibility, not a harbor responsibility.
Well, you know, about 2 years ago, I sent a nice email to the city suggesting that they correct that tunnel now versus in 10 years, because construction costs now are going to be a lot lower than anything they do in 10 years. But don't you see that as a tremendous bottleneck and a tremendous opportunity for an accident? There was a fatality there 3 or 4 years ago, and it's just, to me, it's just an inaccessible route for pedestrians and vehicles in a single lane tunnel at a very busy, beautiful marina like ours.
Committee Member Ford, I couldn't agree with you more. We've done everything we can to discourage any vehicle traffic through there. Primarily now what you're seeing is pedestrian traffic, but even pedestrian crossings, but even then it is a little bit dangerous in that area. I know that there's been discussions with the city. I'm not involved in those discussions because it involves other agencies outside of the city and the harbor about potentially expanding or moving it, but quite honestly, I couldn't give you any information on that.
Okay, thank you.
So the original estimate for the changes to the crossing there and also near the Marina Towers was a lot higher. Is that the final cost, 88,000?
Committee Member Yag, I believe that was just for this budget year. That entire $200,000 has been spent. So that was just in the current budget year.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right, here is my next presentation. I don't require any action on this, and I apologize. I had hoped to be able to present this to you before I presented it to the Arts Commission, but unfortunately the timing didn't allow for that, and I did present this to the Arts Commission 2 weeks ago today, I believe. There's been an idea about having some public art at the harbor. The city has its own policy on public art, and they're still continuing to reevaluate and revise that. But we have a real opportunity to have a really nice piece of public art at the harbor. So as everybody knows here, the harbor and the harbor beach are two of the most popular tourist destinations, certainly for residents as well as people visiting. And we have an opportunity to create something that would be somewhat interactive. This particular art exhibit would create an opportunity for sunsets, potentially engagement marriage proposals, friends and family pictures. And it has to do with what's called a love lock exhibit. This is a mock-up of the actual piece. It sits, and I'm sorry, I should have brought it here tonight. That's an actual small-scale version of the art piece that we are looking at having produced for the harbor. That small piece probably is about 18 inches tall. It must weigh 60 pounds. It's extremely heavy. It is approximately in proportion to what you would see. The actual art piece that we are looking at would be somewheres of 9 to 10 feet tall, 9 to 10 feet wide, so a major piece. Love locks, we're not the first to think about this. If you probably heard about the famous bridge in Paris, where people began placing locks on it. That was just, I think, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And the idea is to put a piece of you at a place you visited and always wanting to come back to that same place. So the locks can be anything from an etched piece of artwork to something with a Sharpie on it. And these are two other pieces that I just showed you there as an example. So the actual location, and I know all of you are familiar with the harbor, but if you see that heart towards the lower left corner, that is the current open space in front of the Outrigger Club. So that space right now has hard-packed DG on it, and it really is a nice location to have a nice piece of public art. This is the view as you'd be looking from the Outrigger Club through the lot to the beach and the wall. And the idea is that piece would sit in front of you if you were in this location at a fairly large stance, again, 9 to 10 feet, and you'd be able to look through that even as locks are being hung onto it. The idea would be, and as you know, this time of year, the sunsets are absolutely beautiful. So the particular piece of art that I showed you, I'll go back to it briefly. You'll notice has in the center an opening, which is the letter O. And so right there, as it would be set up on that particular lot, standing where the Outrigger Club is, looking towards the ocean and the sunset, there would be certain days and times of the year where you could actually capture that sun directly in that O. So it would be an outstanding opportunity for photos, something, again, I think from a social media standpoint that would go around. And as people begin to hang their locks on the Oceanside Love Lock, which we've not yet figured out a name for it, they would come back to see their lock over and over again. So that's an idea of what you might see from the standpoint of, again, standing there, catching a sunset through the O and through the grates that would contain some locks on it. So the estimated cost of this particular piece of art is around $50,000. It has currently been designed, and the mock-up was built by a local artist who used to live in Oceanside, now lives in Vista. This would not be funded in any way from Harbor Enterprise funds, and that is the reason why we've gone to the Arts Commission, is to gain support and direction on how we can present this for funding. And that's what I've basically done, is requested some direction from the Arts Commission on how do we get this approved through the city, how do we fund it. And so they've actually put together an ad hoc committee to assist with that, and we hope to be hearing from them soon. So that concludes that presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Carolyn?
Ted, would that be on the west side or the east side of Harbor Drive?
That would be on the east side of Harbor Drive.
On the east side where the parking lot is, and there's like landscape and,
Yeah, well, right now, that's all DG. It's all basically a hard pack, granulated granite.
so it's
Right
right
there.
next to
It's-
where the entrance is to that side
Correct.
lot?
It's
parking lot?
directly in front of the structure that surrounds the Outrigger Club.
Okay.
Okay.
Ted, who would be maintaining this?
So that particular metal, and I'm sorry I didn't bring, but it's a very specialized metal that requires no maintenance. It actually is so strong and so heavy, it rusts to protect itself. So you actually expect it to rust over time, and it's a thin layer of rust. So there's going to be no maintenance required now. Of course, throughout the harbor, we're always dealing with graffiti. And so graffiti might be the only issue that we have to deal with. But I'm certain under any agreement to have public art will be the agreement that it will be maintained by the harbor. But we don't anticipate anything other than being, having to remove graffiti every now and then, and hopefully not too often.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, thank you. On number 12, we do have one comment. Do you want to read it into the minutes now, please?
Please read my comment in tonight's meeting and forward to each committee member's email address as well as the city council regarding the ordinance amending Chapter 29 of the Oceanside City Code to allow dinghy floats and wet storage, specifically the section within it, notwithstanding the prohibition of subsection A. Any dispute about the condition of the dinghy shall be determined by the harbor division manager. This language in quotes above should be stricken. The harbor manager should not be allowed to subjectively decide the condition of said dinghies. If you notice, the other language used in this and all other documents always lists objective conditions and criteria for decision-making. The citizens, Oceanside, and residents of the Oceanside Harbor have no confidence in this harbor manager to fairly decide, as he has shown himself to target individuals based on personal grievance or perceived class and income level. A set of clear and concise objective criteria should be enumerated instead. Thank you, concerned citizen.
Okay, so I am asking for action on this particular item. I'm bringing forward the establishment of a dinghy wet storage and use of floats amendment to our ordinance. So staff recommends the Harbor and Beaches Advisory Committee recommend the introduction of an ordinance amending Chapter 29 of the Oceanside City Code by modifying Section 29.8.7, which will allow the use of floats to store a dinghy within a slip or at a permitted wet storage location. I will point out that currently now we have dinghies on floats in slips, and we have dinghies on side ties, and none of them are permitted to be in that particular area or on a float. So we are trying to address that. Dinghies are currently allowed to be stored only within a slip, on a vessel, or in a permitted dinghy rack. And as you know, most of those dinghy racks are, if not all of them, are 100% leased with a waiting list. Slip renters need a solution, and they have found a solution, and we just want to be able to make certain that we have some sort of organization regarding who does the dinghy belong to, and where is it located, and is it being properly stored. This is just an example of a couple of dinghies. I think these might be on ZDock, not 100% certain. But again, we have dinghies currently in the harbor that are tied to side tie locations throughout the harbor, T, J, Y, you know which ones we're referring to. Many of them are on floats. We don't have a problem with floats. We understand that individuals want to be able to keep their dinghies out of the water, maintenance issues regarding that. So we want to be able to accommodate that also. And as I would like to point out, we currently have, while dinghies are allowed in slips right now, as long as they fit within the slip, they're not allowed on floats, even though we know a number of slip renters are using floats. So again, we want to provide that opportunity to be able to put it on a float. The amendment to the ordinance will allow for dinghies to be stored on a float in the water in permitted locations and within a slip. The dinghy and/or float cannot create an obstacle for navigation, obviously. Staff recommends the Harbor and Beaches Advisory Committee recommend the introduction of this ordinance, amending Chapter 29, which is going to allow for the use of floats to store a dinghy within a slip or at a permitted wet storage location. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mike?
Thank you. I know that our harbor maintenance supervisor has walked the dock and identified locations where we can safely have those. Do we have a number, a ballpark number of how many might be available?
So I know that I think we estimated at one time we have something like 100 dinghies throughout the harbor right now. We know, because we see the available space, we know there's more available than the 100 or so that we have in the water currently side tied. So I don't have a number yet. The committee, or the dinghy committee, the dinghy group, is going to work on all of this with me very soon, and hopefully by January we can begin implementing. But this is the first step that we have to take. So I can't answer your question directly. I don't know how many are available beyond what we have there, but just from observation, there's more available than what we have.
Do you have an approximate number that you can give us?
Well, like I said, I know we have 100 stored there now. I really can't. I can provide that for you at a later time.
Thank you.
Steve?
Now, I think I'm correct, and I'm happy to hear that you're going to make these available only to current slip renters.
Committee Member Ford, that's correct. We have done that for the last 3 years. We've not offered a dinghy rack to anyone outside of a slip renter. So going forward, absolutely, they are going to be slip renters only.
Great. And you're going to offer them first to the adjacent slips on that particular dock and then open it up to others in the marina?
Committee Member Ford, and that's where the dinghy committee is helping me determine how we're going to do that. But we certainly have a lot of the ones that are in place right now that are fine where they are, and we have additional. So we've asked for people who are interested, please get on a list, and we'll take them, based on that list.
And at a very nominal rate, right?
Very nominal rate.
Good. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, does the fact that, like on Wyandotte, we have two entrances going down to Wyandotte itself. One side you can get out, one side you can't get in, you can go out. But in the middle, it's sort of like a landlock. Are those going to be also used?
Chair Ray, there's dinghies there right now. We know there are. Whether they get in or out will be up to them. There's not going to be any guarantee of navigation in or out of those areas, other than we will make certain we don't block another one from getting around a dinghy. But currently those locations are being used as wet storage. And that's exactly what this is. It is wet storage. So if somebody wants to have an additional location, but somehow they got them in there.
Okay. Just needed clarification. Any other questions? Mike?
One more question for you. Are the slip holders going to be limited in terms of some folks have already storage on the storage racks that are available. A lot of people have multiple kayaks, paddle boards, dinghies. If you are already holding one, are you still able to be put on the list to maybe, if available, get another one?
Vice Chair Kobus, this is where I'm hoping for input from the dinghy committee to help assist with all of those decisions. I think as a group, it'll be fair.
Any other questions?
I have one question. We're talking about a problem that apparently is a problem that we haven't been addressing. All these boats that are tied side ties, and don't you need to address those before you suddenly now, what are you going to do? Just get rid of them?
Committee Member Fars, no, our plan is to identify first who they belong to. So that'll be a process in and of itself, is to tag them, ask them to contact us. We've already done that in some ways, in some communications, is to say, hey, let us know if you have a dinghy in a specific location. We want to know as soon as possible. We do anticipate that some of the dinghies that you see tied are abandoned at this point. We know that people come and go to the harbor, and whether or not they took their dinghy with them or their float with them, we don't know. Part of the reason why we have to organize this, we have to know whose dinghy this belongs to and which permit is it tied to.
Shouldn't we be tagging them now if we're going to talk about doing this?
We will, again, I need very specific direction from our committee group, and we're going to meet prior to implementing this. But there's a lot of questions that are coming up as we go through this. So rather than getting too far ahead of ourselves, I really do want very specific direction on how we're going to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions? So is there a motion so we can take action on this to instruct Ted? Would somebody make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the Harbor and Beaches approve.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Thank you. Okay. Ted,
Yeah,
keep going.
sorry. All
He's
right,
just-
no
yeah.
presentation for this one, no action. Unfortunately, again, the timing makes it difficult. I would have preferred to take this to you as an action item because I will have to go to council to get approval to spend the funds. But again, sometimes timing, you need to meet more often, I think, if we're going to do this.
We're meeting next month.
So you've heard over the past several meetings that we have identified some maintenance issues in the harbor, that we know and understand that the harbor has a limited lifespan. And while staff is excellent at maintenance, we're not excellent at projecting what a concrete piling is underwater or what some other issues are regarding some engineered products. So what we're doing is moving forward with a consulting service who is going to do a very thorough analysis of all of the harbor assets, everything below water, everything above water, and most of the utilities that support that. We went through an RFQ process, and we had multiple firms from around the country present for that. It turns out that 3 companies were very qualified to move to the next round, which was an RFP. We went to an RFP, and all 3 companies presented their proposals. We then had a panel of interviewers, one of which was Vice Chair Kobus, myself, and Brad Gross. Brad Gross is the current executive director for the California Association of Harbor Masters and has a 25-year career in managing harbors. We went through an interview process, and after all of that being done, we have moved forward with a company that we would like to present to council. The company is Brady and Associates. Brady and Associates was the only local company. The other companies were national companies, very capable of, they were all capable of doing this particular study. But Brady, turns out, happens to be a San Diego company. And the reason we selected Brady, many, many reasons we selected Brady, but several of the reasons include that the 2 individuals who are our project engineers were the project engineers for one of the other presenting companies, which was Moffitt and Nickel, when they did a study 5 or 6 years ago. So the 2 people who have the most knowledge of the harbor are with Brady and Associates at this time. The other reason is the team that they put together. A very important piece of this puzzle, if you will, is the financial analysis. And they knew enough to, rather than try to handle that in-house, they brought in a subconsultant called CHM Government that does nothing but consulting for government entities as it relates to these types of projects. In fact, their last project was a marina project. So they're very familiar with how we operate and our finances. Another piece that Brady brought to the table, they were the only company that planned to do a 100% survey of everything underwater, where the other companies had decided that they could do a survey, and there's different terms for this, and I'm not going to try to get into their terms because I'm not an engineer, but where they might test every so many feet. And they'll look here, and then they'll move down 20 feet, and they'll test here, and they'll go on and go on, where Brady has decided to do a complete survey of the entire harbor. And they also were the only firm that was going to do a complete 100% bathymetric survey of the entire harbor. The others were going to do a survey, but it was limited to every open area as opposed to everything under the docks and everything under the vessels. So we feel very comfortable in our recommendation of Brady and Associates. None of this was chosen based on price. Price, of course, was a piece of it. I will tell you that one of the firms came in at $380,000. Brady came in at $399,000, and Trans Systems came in at about $540,000. So Brady wasn't the cheapest, but again, we felt it was the best value, and they are eager and anxious to get here to begin this study. As I've mentioned over many, many meetings, this study is very important where we are right now. We know that our assets cannot last forever. Docks, typically at the time our docks were built, were lasting about 40 years. That's where we are today. So we already know we have a dock that failed and needs to be replaced. We don't want to have to piecemeal replace our docks. We want to be able to maintain them through a longer period of time until we can get to a point where our harbor can be rebuilt. So once we go through the facility assessment, they're then going to do a 12 to 15-year maintenance plan for the harbor. That's going to be our Bible for the next 12 to 15 years. We're going to follow that plan, and we're going to meet those requirements as they've presented it to us. The final piece of it is, how is this all going to play out from a financial standpoint? Can we make it with our current condition? Do we need to make changes in the harbor? We really need to know. We don't want to be, we don't want something to go wrong years down the road where we recognize we can't do this any longer. Once we get through this complete study, which we anticipate taking about a year, and we feel comfortable in the maintenance plan and comfortable in the financial plan, my recommendation would be that we move to a master plan, which the harbor has never had. So a master plan is something that would be done over a few-year period with tremendous stakeholder engagement regarding where do you want to go from here? Because the harbor's not going to last forever. It is going to fail at some point in time, and we just need to be prepared for it. So our recommendation is going to be Brady and Associates, and be glad to answer any questions.
Would they be willing to come down and just say hi to this committee as a presentation?
I'd be glad to do that, and I'm certain they would be.
I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you, sir. Next, we have Harbors and Beaches Advisory Committee 2019-2021 workshop update. I know that some have met, and at this time, let's say, operations, harbor operations, have you met? Yeah. Go ahead. Go, Joe.
We had 4 items after our meeting the other day with Mike, Liz, and Joe. And we're going to be focusing in the future on going through the Blue Book, make sure we can clarify any of the issues that are not clarified. Let me read this correctly. We will bring a few ideas to discuss at each meeting, and here's an example. Right now on page 18 in the Blue Book, it says no anchoring in the harbor except for an emergency. Since the COVID outbreak, many people have been anchoring in the outer harbor for the day. other anchors and fish there. Perhaps a newer edition of the Blue Book could include no anchoring in the inner harbor or in the channel, or whatever decision was made to enforce that. But that's nothing to discuss tonight. Number two, while we were having our meeting, we noticed that the storage locker on H dock is starting to lean again. And our suggestion would be to center the lockers on the float rather than trying to correct the lean. Number three, according to the book here, the harbor slip revenue is down from the anticipated amounts. Many slips are sitting empty for months before a new boat arrives. The MDOC Entie is an example. Sometimes the harbor puts a short-term rental there, but who is paying the rent the rest of the time? There's a slip on H-Dock that has been empty for 5 months. That's over $3,000 in lost revenue. It used to be the harbor would call you up and literally give you 24 to 48 hours to decide whether you wanted that slip, and then they'd go to the next person on the list. So right now, it seems we're losing money on slips not being filled. And if you want to address that in a minute. And then the last issue was there's been boats overnighting in the red zone at the pump out station near the launch ramps. I've had a couple bigger boat owners come up to me and tell me they can't fit in or they've had trouble getting in. On a Sunday, who would a slip runner call if that was obstructed? I know during the week when the office is open, you can call over the office. And as the last item, the tree service is doing a great job of cleaning up the dangerous palm fronds around the harbor.
Thank you. And also, when we get started on the Blue Book, I would ask to make sure that we all are working off the same Blue Book. So apparently the latest and the greatest is for 2016. I know that I have given it to the committee that was working on this and some other people. If you don't have a 2016, please see Jennifer or anybody up at the harbor office, and they can give you one. So we can all read off the same page. Thank you. Financial. Joe.
Yeah, we met on October, I think it was 15th, and went through the budget and the actuals. One of the biggest things that we were talking about at the time was that 5.2 million, and I'm not sure I still understand where that money came from and why it went when it did. When it's coming from a type of entity that's not supposed to, it's supposed to work on its own like it's a company. And so there shouldn't be a $5.2 million transfer. That's not how it works. So I'm anxious to see what the explanation is. We must misunderstand it. I hope that's it. Otherwise, it seems that we'd be owed about $5.2 million. We also, we're trying to think of ways that we can reduce our expenses. And that's going to be an ongoing thing. One of the major expenses in the harbor, obviously, is maintenance, but we know in detail what a lot of that is. The next biggest expense, which is 30% of the total budget, is the police department, the Oceanside Police Department. We don't know what that is. It's very hard to ascertain how many boats they're maintaining, how many boats they're actually using. I had that question last meeting, and there's, in a professional boating community, you have boat logs, so they should know when each boat is going out and how many hours it's out, how many hours it's operating. And we brought this up, I've only been here for 2 meetings, but I'm sure it's been brought up a lot, and we don't really get an answer for it. That's a major expense, and it's something we're paying a lot of money for. It also seems to me that the police department spends a lot of time on calls outside the harbor. I see them come to work, and then I see the police cars leave. And if we're paying for all of those policemen that are leaving our harbor and going someplace else to patrol, that's an expense that we ought to look at. Other things we talked about was ways that we can increase the bottom line for the harbor. And a good example is like the dinghies that are being stored. If we could get $6 a month or whatever it would be to store those dinghies where they are, and you've got over 100 of them, that's some more income that's without raising slip renter fees. I guess that's pretty much what we started to talk about, and it's going to be an ongoing thing, and I hope we can work with you, Ted, on how we can look at the budget and make sure that it's being spent wisely, and save where we can. One of the things with the police that it's hard to discuss right now is I know there's a discussion about public safety transition proposal. That could change everything in terms of how it's all budgeted, and so it's kind of hard to go in detail on the police issues right now. Anyway, we'll keep meeting and we'll keep working on it.
Ted, did you want to address anything, or?
Committee Chair Ray, if you would allow me, and I believe I can attend an ad hoc committee meeting, you know, I might be able to address and answer some questions right at those
Okay.
meetings, which I'm very willing to do. And/or if I'm provided questions in advance, I can also, you know, have prepared answers for a lot of those questions also.
And then we could meet up in the meeting room up at the office then.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that'd be wise. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you. Harbor appearance. Did you guys meet? No? Okay. Okay, thank you, James. Long-term vision. Steve?
Yeah, we met in the beautiful yacht club last week. Some of the things we discussed were, of course, safety. One of the things that I think would be a great improvement in the harbor would be a bike path, a Malecone, so to speak, for dog walkers, joggers, or pedestrians. You know, Carlsbad has an incredible walkway along their shoreline. So does Dana Point. In their marina, they've got some artwork similar to what Mr. Schiaffone is recommending. And also La Jolla, they've got a pedestrian-safe trails along their shoreline. I think Oceanside deserves one for our harbor. It alleviates some of the congestion at 1400 North Harbor Drive, you know where the seal dock is? Also discussed the Jolly Roger laying vacant. That could be restored to a public park with a grassy knoll and picnic benches and barbecue pits. They could use the launches there for kayaks. So we talked about a lot of things. One of the things we touched on was the proposal to reorganize the harbor police and the lifeguards for safety and the increased presence for patrol boats. But are we still prohibited to discuss that at these meetings?
We are not far enough in the...
What?
We are not far enough in the other meeting to really get into it at this point.
Okay.
There's a lot of probing, a lot of questions that have been asked, and hopefully, I would say, probably after the election, we'll have a better handle on this to answer public input and public questions.
Because, you know, that's important. You know, the perfect storm some weekend would include a sea lion biting somebody, a boat getting flipped over in the entrance to the marina, and a paddleboarder drowning. I mean, call me a pessimist, call me negative, but we have the potential for all those three things happening in a busy weekend here.
Yeah. Everything but a seal bite I know has happened. So,
But we've not scheduled a second meeting, but we'll incorporate your questions for the ad hoc
yeah,
that you sent out today. Thanks, Liz.
okay. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. And again, thank you for taking the extra time on doing this. I know it's sometimes a burden to get together, but this is very important, and a work plan is something that we really need and makes more sense if we put it together instead of just rubber stamping one from another year. Committee member reports. Does anybody have anything to report? Okay. Yes, go ahead.
James, how's the fish market going? Can you let us know if there's any progress?
At this point, we're still working working on it. It's been kind of a busy time for me. I haven't really spent much time ago with a light on it. I try to do something every day, and we're still going forward. I would say that within the next month or two, we should have some progress.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? We do not have a council liaison tonight, so the next meeting will be in November. It would be November, oh my gosh. Yeah, because of December, we are not meeting in December, we're meeting in November. And do we have that date? As a hush. Do we have the date? Yeah. November 16th. Thank you. November what? 16th. 16th? 1/6. So we'll be here on the 16th. Like a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Please stay safe. Thank you.